Hello, a very good evening. It's 8:01 on LBC. Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Cross Question. It's Cross Question with a bit of a difference today because we've got four representatives from the business community with us. Was it last week or the week before? We did a Cross Question on world affairs. It was so successful, we thought we'd do another specialist one this week. Actually, we planned it months ago, but anyway. Let me introduce you to our panel. We have with us Lord Karen Moria, President of the CBI, founder of Cobra Beer. Emma Jones is founder of Enterprise Nation, a very familiar voice to you on LBC from our business hour. John Elliott is Executive Chairman of Ebac, and Lance Foreman is a former Brexit Party MEP and Chairman of H. Foreman and Sons, purveyors of excellent smoked salmon. Free advert there for you, Lance. Now, don't forget you can also watch our proceedings on Global Player on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk or the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook feed or Twitter feed. 0345 6060 973. That's the number to call. We are going to take predominantly business-related questions, but if you want to ask something on a different subject, try and think of a little bit of a business angle. That would be really helpful.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Well, welcome to you all. Our first caller is Caleb, who's in Guildford. Caleb, what would you like to ask?
Good evening, Iain, and good evening, panellists. As we now go into a sort of an economic recovery sort of phase, and we're getting on top of the coronavirus crisis, we have to pay the bills. And the obvious bill is that the national debt is at an all-time high, although interest rates are very low, so we can service that debt. But nevertheless, there is immense intergenerational unfairness, so to speak, in the sense that younger people have to struggle to get on the housing ladder, and the older generation generally have, a lot of housing wealth and have a lot of, very fairly generous pensions. So if the panelists were had to advise the government in terms of squaring the need for getting the economy going and also paying off the national debt, what advice would they be giving to the Chancellor, and what taxes would have to go up, and where would public spending have to be cut, and what would be the role of business in this?
So about four questions there, Caleb. Well done. We could actually do the whole programme just based on your question, I think. Karen Moria, it's some really good points there that Caleb is making. What's your response?
Caleb, thank you for your question. And this is a question I get asked a lot of the time is, We've spent all this money saving the economy. How are we going to pay for it? And I think we've got to keep this in perspective. I was privileged to chair the B7 summit in advance of the G7. We fed into the G7. And we had Dr. Geeta Gopinath, the chief economist of the IMF, who spoke to us from Washington. And she said the global recovery is going to be a twin-track recovery around the world. There are going to be countries like the United Kingdom that have been able to spend a huge amount of money. I mean, £400 billion in absolute terms or in per capita terms is very high. And that has helped to save businesses and helped to save jobs. On top of that, she said countries that have a vaccination program that is really good, and we're ahead of the game on that. We've got 2/3 of the adult population vaccinated, almost 90% of adults first jab. We're doing really well at the vaccinations. So countries like that will bounce back very quickly. And Andy Haldane, who just retired as chief economist of the Bank of England, said our economy is like a coiled spring. So given that we're in this fortunate position, we should be able to bounce back very quickly. But what we do not need are taxes, and what we do not need is austerity. After the financial crisis, we had a decade of austerity, which led to low growth, and look where it got us. So we definitely don't need that. In fact, in February, the Indian government had their budget a month before our budget in March. And I remember being on a call with the chief civil servant in charge of the budget and the head of the Confederation of Indian Industry, the counterpart of the CBI, Confederate British Industry. And they said very clearly, we did not increase his taxes in the Indian budget. We did not increase taxes. Two reasons. One, businesses have suffered so much. Two, we don't want to stifle the recovery. And I said, I hope our Indian origin Chancellor Rishi Sunak is listening very carefully, because do not increase taxes. And
okay.
He didn't increase taxes. But if you don't tax in 2 years' time, and so we now have this chance for two things: no tax increases, encouraging growth, encouraging investment. We've got the super deduction of 130%, because what's going to happen is when you encourage growth, when you encourage job creation, it's a job creation that creates the taxes. The highest amount of tax comes from PAY and national insurance, and the VAT when people spend. So that's going to pay for the 400 billion.
I get that, but the 2 trillion national debt, you haven't mentioned once in that answer. Does it not matter?
So, at the end of the Second World War, our debt went up to 250% of GDP. It took until 1963 to get that down to 100% of GDP, which is where we are at the moment. So there's no question about that. And at today's very low level of interest rates, 0.1%, that's the lowest since the Bank of England was founded in the late 1600s. At that very low level of interest rates, we can afford that debt. And it is, but if interest rates go up, if we have inflation, which I'm personally very worried about, we are already seeing inflation in many areas, then that is going to be a challenge going forward.
Emma Jones from Enterprise Nation, you deal predominantly with small and medium-sized enterprises. Just give your answer, if you can, within that prism, because obviously, I mean, I've always thought the recovery is not going to be driven by necessarily all the large companies. It's the SMEs that are going to drive the recovery.
Iain, there's only one prism from which I can ever speak, which is small businesses. And yeah, I mean, in response to the kind of question, I would say boost the confidence of small businesses. This is kind of the job to do now. Consumers are spending, which is amazing. And the big thing that we want to see is essentially small businesses primed to make sales. Because back to that question of how we do pay down the national debt, and again, Lord Billamore has just referred to this, is the more sales that small businesses are generating, the more taxes they'll be paying, regardless of the tax rate going up. They'll just be paying more because they're making more. So if we can equip, and actually we're launching a sales training program tomorrow, because small businesses across the board have said to us, we're feeling confident, we're feeling optimistic, we can see our consumers coming back. And of course, those businesses that were online over the last 15 months haven't actually lost any of their customers. It's more those with physical premises. They can see customers coming back. They're excited about the potential of international trade. What they want is the skills and training on how do I get more customers? How do I keep those customers coming back to me? And then they're very happy to pay the tax that comes as a result of hopefully creating more wealth.
John Elliott, let me just repeat the question, which I'm going to sum up in this way. Given the huge national debt, how should the public finances be restructured? Now, I introduce you as Executive Chairman of Ebac. Just for our listeners who don't know you, what is Ebac? And just give us a little flavour of where you're coming from on this.
Well, Ebac with manufacturing, and we've been around for 50 years next February. We manufacture washing machines, dehumidifiers and bottled water coolers. So I'm 100% manufacturing. That's my entire life, and that's a long life as well. So I just think of this in simple terms. Imagine a household. You've had a devastating 2 years of income. Do you borrow money to maintain your lifestyle, or do you cut back? Now, my view is you cut back. Would you, if you've had a devastating year, would you then go and buy a conservatory on hire purchase? You've got to cut back. We've got to look at balancing the books. We didn't even balance the books before the pandemic. We've got to get back to basic fundamentals of spending no more than we earn.
Now, if I was speaking to a Labour politician, if we had a Labour politician on the panel now, they would say you cannot compare household expenditure to government expenditure. There is no comparison there. Margaret Thatcher used to do it quite a lot, but they are different, aren't they?
It's exactly the same. It's the same in business. In business, if you've had 2 difficult years, you've got to adjust. You've got to change your activities. You've got to spend less. You've got to look at. You've got to be realistic. You've got to balance the books. I find it very difficult when people say, as someone just said now, you can borrow money because the interest's cheap. You've got to repay it 100%. We shouldn't be. But that's the attitude of a teenager. I'll borrow the money because it's got low interest rates. We should only borrow the money if we need to borrow it. We shouldn't borrow money to maintain our lifestyle. If you've got a hole in the roof, you borrow money, but you don't borrow money to go out on a Friday night. And that's what we do. We're borrowing money to maintain our lifestyle because politicians believe to get re-elected.
I don't know if you've ever been called a teenager before, Karen, but that remark was aimed at you. I mean, there is a point to this. We cannot keep burdening future generations with more and more debt. Surely John is absolutely right. A bit of Thatcherism, that's what we need.
John's point.
It's as simple as that.
Point, of balancing the books, absolutely that is the intention of balance the books. But you've got to look at the situation we were in. In February last year, we had unemployment at 3.5%, one of the lowest in our history, going back to the 1970s. We had an economy that was not in recession, an economy that wasn't maybe growing a lot, but it was growing a little bit. It was fine. Now we've had this pandemic, and perfectly good businesses and a perfectly good economy has been brought to its knees. It dropped by nearly 10% last year. So we have suffered hugely. And it's thanks to the support that we're now going to be able to bounce back very quickly.
Okay.
And I'm very confident we're going to bounce back very quickly, and we're going to be able to pay back this debt through growth and investment.
Now, Lance Foreman, your business has been at the sharp end of this over the last 18 months, I imagine. Your customers, again, correct me if I'm wrong, are predominantly in the hospitality sector. How have you survived, and what do you want the government to do now, and particularly in relation to Caleb's question about restructuring the finances? And you've seen a big disagreement here between John and Karen. Where do you stand?
Well, lots of questions there.
Yeah,
how have we survived, first of all? We have a wholesale business supplying hotels, restaurants, and so on, and then we have an online business, and we're very lucky that we have the online business because people still have to eat, and they might not go out to restaurants, but they still have to eat somewhere.
That was your saviour,
and so it was our saviour that we were able to supply food direct to people's homes. So that was on a personal note. We were very fortunate that helped plug the gap. I agree with John on government borrowing. The government can't keep on borrowing. Yes, it's cheap to borrow now, but it's not necessarily going to be cheap forever. And at some stage, the government has to pay it back. And, he compared Labour politicians to teenagers. The thing is, a household is the same household come what may. A politician might only be in power for 5 years, and then he can throw the problem onto somebody else. So they don't really have the same, you really can't compare the two. The debt has to be paid back. My biggest concern, actually, is that the government have decided that the way to pay the debt back is to raise corporation tax in a few years' time. I think that's an absolute massive mistake.
Well, we've actually got a question on that in a bit, so don't go too far down that particular rabbit hole.
No, look, at the end of the day, it's private sector growth is what counts. It's not government spending, because government could only spend taxpayers' money. It's private sector growth and private sector wealth is what you want to sort of stimulate. And there are only two ways to do that. One is to have low taxes to encourage business, and the other is to deregulate, to free up all the burdens from business. And I think that is something that, again, the government seems to be missing. COVID has brought about so many additional regulations and made life just impossible for business. We need to get out of this mindset and just free life up for business and let business do its thing. It always does it well when it has that freedom.
Caleb, how do you answer your own 5 questions?
I think, it's inevitable that some medium-term fiscal consolidation will be required. The question is the nature of that and over what time period. But my biggest bugbear is 2 things. I think structurally, if you look at the UK economy over the last 30 years, the investment to GDP ratio amongst the G7 economies has been amongst the lowest. So I think, we need to invest. You can, if you borrow money to invest, it's sensible. But if you borrow to finance consumption, like we've done over the last year, well, that's not very sensible. Secondly, I think we do have very, very low rates of corporation tax. And I think in some European countries, they have higher rates of corporation tax, yet they have higher rates of economic growth as well. So I think the argument that, the level of corporation tax should be lower is somewhat weak, in my opinion. But I would say that for startup businesses and for smaller businesses, lower taxes are required. And I think some of the bigger businesses with broader shoulders can, pay higher levels of taxes.
Okay.
But the other point I'd like to make is some of these
very quickly
big tech companies, they have to pay their fair share. They're taking a lot of income out of the UK economy, and they're basically hoarding the cash overseas. So I think, we need to have some sort of fair playing field amongst the big multinationals. We need to pay for the public services and because UK consumers are big buyers of Apple products.
Okay,
Microsoft
Caleb,
products.
we have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your question. I'm going to give our panel unusually advance notice of what the next question is while we go to a break. This is from Simon in Beaconsfield. Boris Johnson once famously said, I have to be very careful now. F business. Has he lived up to his promise? That's a tease to keep you listening. It's 16 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
If you're not working at the moment or your income has reduced, Universal Credit and other benefits could provide financial support. You can also get government-funded independent advice on whether Universal Credit is right for you from Citizens Advice Help to Claim advisors. It's free and confidential and will help you work out what support you could get. Visit gov.uk/help to claim. Eligibility criteria apply.
Hey, Harry. Hello, mate. Play Vegas playlist.
I'm sorry, pal. I've just moved house and all my records are stuck up in the loft. But listen, if it's the bright lights of Vegas you're after, your best bet is to head over to the BetVictor Casino and have a spin on the slots. Now listen, a little tip. Oh, hold up. I've got to run. The football's about to start.
Harry? Listen to Harry and make your best bet with BetVictor. 18 plus, be gamble aware. Please gamble responsibly.
If you're looking for authentic mouth-watering Indian cuisine, majestic ambiance from a bygone era, and a magical dining experience that will give you a taste of Indian royalty, Madhu's Mayfair is the place to be. Treat your family and business associates to authentic Punjabi recipes handed down through generations and innovative dishes, specially prepared on the Rabata Grill. Visit our new location at the Dilly, Piccadilly, now open. Royal Indian cuisine for the Maharaja in you. Bookings at mayfair@mothers.co.uk.
Mercedes-Benz may have to pay thousands of pounds to drivers after they allegedly installed defeat devices to pass vehicle emissions tests. Did you purchase or lease a Mercedes diesel vehicle made between 2009 and 2018? Then you could be entitled to thousands of pounds in compensation, even if you no longer own or lease the car. To find out if you qualify and join the claim, visit mercedes-emissionsclaim.co.uk or text JOIN to 85222.
Running a successful business comes with many different challenges, but right now the need for good business advice is more important than ever. At Barnes Roof Accountants, we are helping our clients adapt their business strategies by looking at the best ways to cope with both the immediate and long-term impact of COVID-19. To arrange a free consultation with one of our partners to find out how we can support you and your business, please visit barnesroof.com. Barnes Roof, clever accountants for business.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
With Purple Bricks, book your free in-home or virtual valuation.
With me are Lord Billamoria from Cobra Beer and the CBI, Emma Jones from Enterprise Nation, John Elliott from Ebac, and Lance Foreman from H. Foreman and Sons. Right, let's go to this text question. Boris Johnson once famously said, F business. Has he lived up to his promise, Emma Jones? And can we have fairly brief answers on this one?
Okay, well, so my very brief answer is it's definitely getting better. I remember when Boris made a speech pre-COVID, it was a big kind of speech in terms of what he wanted to see as Britain's place in the world. And he was talking about, I want to build, build, build. And I guess everything that I look for in a Prime Minister is I want them to reference small business and entrepreneurship in every speech. So I almost kind of wanted him to go on and say, we're going to build, 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 and loads of those contracts are going to go to small businesses. You know, entrepreneurship is alive and well, but we are getting better. Every month we take 14 small businesses to meet the Prime Minister's business advisor. Last week it was 14 young entrepreneurs. They talk about their life. The advisor learns more about their world and kind of says, let's set policy that hopefully helps you navigate some of this upcoming regulation. So it's getting better. The key thing for me, and just to kind of finish off on this point, it's super important for governments at the heart of government, so within Number 10 Downing Street, to understand business. So I think that's a really important factor. You know, the heydays when Lord Young was in at Number 10 as entrepreneur in residence, there were business people sitting around the cabinet table. That's important. And as I say, I would just love to see more celebration of the role of small businesses and entrepreneurs. And I hope there's more of that to come.
I did a very good hour-long interview with Lord Young the other day on my book club podcast for anyone that's interested. John Elliott, Boris Johnson once famously said, F business, has he lived up to his promise?
Well, I think the first thing to say is business is here to serve people, not the other way around. And sometimes going for growth suits business, but not people. Business will try and persuade people to buy things they don't need and sometimes can't afford. And in the long run, that isn't healthy. We've got to stop thinking about business. Business is very important, but it must be here to serve people and not the other way around.
Are you optimistic about the future of the manufacturing sector in general at the moment?
Very optimistic.
And I mean, we haven't got a question so far on Brexit, I don't think. But I mean, I've always thought that Brexit offered a real opportunity for manufacturing industry. That's not a view held by everyone, it has to be said. What's your view?
I think it is. But again, Brexit to me is what's right for people, not what's right for business. Manufacturing has got to get bigger because that's the only way we balance the books. And we must balance the books. This idea we can borrow money because it's cheap is wrong. We've got to balance the books.
Okay, Lance Foreman.
So when Boris said F business, he was talking about it in the context of Brexit. And I think what you need to understand is that business doesn't speak with one voice. Small businesses, as Emma's mentioned, family businesses are very different to sort of major sort of international sort of corporations and conglomerates. And when Boris made that statement, he was talking to people, Lord Killimore, like the CBI. You know, they represent those huge international businesses. They've got 1,500 members, but there are 5 million small businesses across the UK. And, you know, if you look at what the CBI was saying at the time, they were going completely against the vote. The president at the time, Mike Rake, was calling for a people's vote. He wanted a reverse Brexit. He was saying we'd lose 50 to 100 billion pounds in GDP. We would lose somewhere in the region of 500,000 jobs. But now the thing's completely turned around. Now the CBI are saying there are huge opportunities and we must seize the moment. It's the best, you know, Brexit has provided great opportunities for us. So, you know, where do they stand? And should the government be seeking advice from an organisation that never really believed in it but is now playing to that tune? Or should they talk to the people that were really passionately behind it and seek advice about business from them?
Well, I'm looking forward to your answer, Karen, on that one. But, Lance is right to the extent that F-business remark was made, I think it was true at the time, towards the CBI, wasn't it?
Can we get a few things straight over here? Emma, I'm an entrepreneur. I started with just 2 people. In India, there's a term MSME. We don't talk about SMEs in India. You talk about MSMEs, micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. So I started as a micro business, then an S, then an M, and now I've got a global joint venture with Molson Coors, one of the largest brewers in the world. I'm a proud British manufacturer. We've won 128 gold medals, most of them manufactured in Britain. Britain is one of the best manufacturers in the world. 10% of our GDP, but that 10% is fantastic, high-quality manufacturing.
And we are still, I think, the 9th biggest manufacturing nation in the world, which I don't think people understand.
And whether it's in aerospace, automobiles, in a huge spectrum of areas, we are world leaders. I chair the Manufacturing Commission. I'm really proud of it. We've just produced a report recently. So that's the thing. And where the CBI is concerned, my attitude is very simple. Brexit's happened. We've left the European Union. We've left the transition period. We've now got to get on with it, and we've got to seize the moment and make the most of the opportunity. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a businessman. I'm a realist, and I'm very confident of our future. Now, here's to answer the question that was asked. I was on Boris Johnson's council when he was Mayor of London, on the Promote London Council, which was all about inward investment into London. He understands business. He loves business. He made that remark at one time. He doesn't believe that in the long term. Here's the acid test. How has the CBI and the government worked over the last 16 months? And by the way, we speak for 190,000 businesses that employ 7 million people, which is 1/3 of the private sector workforce, which is made up of lots of SMEs, and also almost 200 trade associations, from the National Farmers Union to the Law Society. So for all sectors across the whole of the United Kingdom. And collaboration has been the key word. And this government has listened. Rishi has listened. The business secretary has listened. Every time, whether it's the furlough scheme needed to be extended, whether it's VAT going down from 20% to 5%, whether it's social distancing, if you remember the 2-meter rule, businesses would not have been able to open up if we'd had 2 meter. They listened on evidence to go to 1 meter. So I've been very happy with the collaborative approach this government, and it's worked.
Lance, would you accept that there has been a fundamental change in attitude, in public stance from the CBI? I mean, if you compare what Caroline Fairbairn was saying and the president at the time, whose name momentarily escapes me, compared to what the new guy is saying and what Karen is saying. I mean, when I've interviewed you in the past, I compare our interviews over the past 6 months to a year compared to what we were talking about during the Brexit campaign. And it's almost like you've become a new man, Karen.
Well, I'm a realist. I've got to be pragmatic, and I've got to look ahead, and I'm very optimistic about this country's future. I really passionately believe we're one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world.
That I think is the great thing, and that you are all exuding a sense of real optimism.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen in these discussions, I have to tell you, particularly when we've got politicians on the panel.
Karen is a brilliant entrepreneur. He produces a fantastic product. We all love it. And, it's great that we do have a new voice at the CBI now. But what I would say is that, the government does need to, because it's all very easy to sort of say, oh, no, we got it wrong then, but we're completely changing our tune now. And I think, it would be good if the government actually spoke to people that were passionately involved and saw the opportunities that Brexit created beforehand, because they're the ones that had the same vision that the people of Britain had when they voted in that way. They're not just changing their position to suit what the current...
And look at Liz Truss, and look at what she's done. She's rolled over 67 bilateral trade agreements with the European
Union. And she was a Remainer.
Nobody believed that would happen. It's happened, and we've got new ones with Australia, New Zealand's down the road, America, India, an enhanced trade partnership. We're going to double the trade with India over the next decade.
Actually,
This is fantastic.
just on that, John, how much of your business is export-led?
Probably about half of it, partly to the EU and partly to the USA.
And what would you like the government to do to help you expand that market?
Used to be France, now the USA. We've got to change some rules to make it more. They've got to intervene without giving money. Just getting rid of red tape, for example, as Lance said, is an important thing. Lots of red tape, it costs money. We've just got to look at things more simply. And try and take the benefits now of we can now set our own tariffs with exports and imports. So the government just got to intervene. Otherwise, one of the problems I think we've got is we get inward investment, but we need internal investment. The problem in the UK is you can make more money playing the stock market than investing in real businesses. All the car manufacturers in the UK were very successful are all foreign owned. We've got to get internal investment. The government's got to make it more attractive to invest in businesses rather than playing the stock market.
And how important is it for your business for the government to negotiate more free trade agreements? Because they've done one with Japan. Is that a market that you can look at now? We've got a free trade agreement with them.
Well, we've actually sold water coolers to Japan. Actually, I think the tariffs are not really a big deal, actually, in my experience. On things like water coolers, it's about 0.5%. So on industrial product, the tariff is not a big issue. Currency changes is the bigger problem, but you've got to forget those things. It swings and roundabouts. You've got to make a good product that people want to buy. It's as simple as that.
Emma, I'd see you nodding your head.
Well, just because I love the simplicity of what John says, that final comment of you just got to make a product that people want to buy. But just the kind of Liz Truss comment, I have watched in awe as she has announced almost on a daily basis. She's in the US this week. And what our advice to small businesses is literally follow Liz Truss on Twitter, see the countries in which she's doing the deals, and then go out and get the business. There has been a little bit in the press this week that the department that Liz runs, Department for International Trade, has actually just dropped a small business programme which was called Trade Show Access Programme. It gave small amounts of money to small businesses to go to trade shows. I think that's part of the reality, the harsh reality we're in, that trade shows just aren't happening in person. But there's an internationalisation fund that small businesses can apply for, which gives them funds to help them kind of go global. And of course, and Iain, you know this because we've spoken about it so many times on the Business Hour, incredible international trading marketplaces that enable British businesses literally from their spare room to put anything like from salmon through to kind of, homewares up on these trading marketplaces, and they can be trading with the world by the Wednesday. So incredible technology enablements. Follow where the Secretary of State's going to see where those trade deals are happening. I do come back to celebration, though. I think the more that high-profile politicians can be banging the drum to say, right, British businesses, go out to the world, sell your wares. I also come back to making sales. Give small businesses and large the confidence to get out there and sell, not just at the UK level, but also at the global level. We need that confidence at the top. And then, of course, then the technical practicalities to enable businesses to do it. But the world is literally our oyster, I think, at the moment.
And the government's done some fantastic things. They've just got this new loan guarantee scheme for exports. I mean, that's just the sort of thing the government should be doing to encourage exports. And to John's point, by the way, we are this tiny country, 1% of the world's population, but we're the second largest recipient of inward investment in the world. And I think that's something to be proud of.
Nick says, Lord Billamore are quite... Sorry, John?
I don't like inward investment. I think we need internal investment.
Both.
People
We need both. We need both.
No, people invest in the UK to make money out of it, not make money for us. You know, we just need to, people don't invest in the UK for our benefit. They do it for their benefit. We need more internal investment. Unfortunately,
it would be a brave... Sorry, it would be a brave government to say, no, we don't want any inward investment. Thank you very much. Nick says, Lord Billamore are quite convincing until he mentions Liz Truss, who's all smoke and mirrors. Well, all the rest of the panel seem to think that she's doing an absolutely fine job. Right, we're going to try and fit 2 questions into our next segment. Let's see if we can manage that. It's 8:31, news headlines with Lucinda Horsley.
Boris Johnson's been meeting social media companies to demand urgent action to tackle online abuse following attacks on Black England players. Protesters have taken the knee at the mural of Marcus Rashford, which was damaged after England's defeat in the Euro 2020 final. Plans to cut the UK's foreign aid budget by £4 billion a year have been backed by MPs. The government says the move's necessary following the financial strain of the COVID crisis. Colin Pitchfork, who raped and murdered 2 15-year-old girls in the 1980s, will be freed from prison. The parole board has rejected a government challenge and maintains that he is suitable for release. LBC weather: showers in central England and Scotland tonight, clearer spells elsewhere, but some cloud on north and eastern coasts, a low of 11 degrees.
This is LBC.
Summer's here, and Ocado's got a sizzling deal just for you. Charred sausage lovers, get a 3 for £10 barbecue bundle, including Hex sausages, M&S Best Burgers, and Ocado's barbecue range. So however you do summer,
there's an Ocado just for you.
Ends 31st of August. Selected items. Geographical restrictions.
Expedia presents a tribute to that special someone you never leave home without. Your bestie, BFF, your buddy old pal, brother from another mother, or sister from another mister. Partner in crime, your ride or die. Whatever you call them, everywhere's better when you travel together. That's why, like a great companion, Expedia has your back throughout your journey with flexible options all in one app.
Flexible options on selected hotels. Terms apply at or protected.
Love the feeling of being out on the road with the sun on your face and the wind in your hair? Get that feeling. Join the AA today. Our mechanics will usually get you going again in around 30 minutes of arrival. Plus, with unlimited call-outs, we'll always be there when you need us. Switch to the UK's #1 breakdown service from £6 a month. We'll get you back on the road. Join today at theaa.com. New customers only. T's and C's apply. For #1 verification, go to theaa.com/UK's #1.
Find the credit card you've been looking for. Quick check won't affect your score. See if it's a yes. No need to guess with an Ocean credit card.
With a credit limit up to £1,500. Check if you're eligible for an Ocean credit card. It only takes a minute. Intelligent Lending Limited is a credit broker. Capital One the exclusive lender. Representative 39.9% APR variable. No annual fee. Get a credit limit of up to £1,500. Visit ocean.co.uk.
Mercedes-Benz may have to pay thousands of pounds to drivers after they allegedly installed defeat devices to pass vehicle emissions tests. Did you purchase or lease a Mercedes diesel vehicle made between 2009 and 2018? Then you could be entitled to thousands of pounds in compensation, even if you no longer own or lease the car. To find out if you qualify and join the claim, visit mercedesemissionsclaim.co.uk or text JOIN to 85222.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
With Purple Bricks. Meet your local property expert today.
I know a lot of people tune in at 8:30, so let me reintroduce my panel. Lord Billamore is president of CBI, founder of Cobra Beer. Emma Jones is founder of Enterprise Nation. John Elliott is executive chairman of Ebac, and Lance Foreman is chairman of H. Foreman and Son. Is that right? Is that your proper job title?
People call me all sorts of
I'm
strange
sure they
things.
do.
Chairman will do.
Let's not go into that. Right, Christopher is in Wimbledon. Christopher, what's your question for our panel, please?
Hi, Ian. Hi, panel. Simple question. How do you solve a problem like corporation tax?
Well, that is a very short and simple question. John Elliott, let's come to you first.
Well, very simple. I would get rid of all taxes on income and business and have one tax on consumption. One simple tax, which is on consumption. And the more you consume, the more tax you pay. Dead simple, that. Very easy to apply, like VAT. So that's what I would go for, the turnover tax, and get rid of income tax and profit tax, because making profit is good. Don't handicap. Earning money is good. Encourage that and get your money from consumption. The more people consume, the more the tax they pay.
Well, there shouldn't be any business taxes.
Simple. No tax on income of any kind, only tax on consumption. And it can be a higher rate for fuel or things that are bad for the environment. One simple tax. And then all of these lawyers and accountants working out schemes to avoid tax, all the jobs have gone, and we can use them for building washing machines instead.
Well, that would be true. But if you are somebody who's on the breadline and instead of paying 20% VAT, you're paying 35% VAT, you're not going to think that's a great idea.
It would be about 1% on turnover, because it would be turnover not on. It would be much smaller than that. But of course, there's lots of adjustments, but it's got to be something we change too, because obviously your income could be reduced, couldn't it? Wages could be reduced because there's no tax to pay. So I think it'll take some time, but we've got to think outside the box and do things different. Our current tax system is too complicated, and there's too many people spending time trying to avoid paying it legitimately. Okay. So we need something simple. Let's think about it. We don't change things enough. We all resist change. We've got to think outside the box. And I would make a very simple tax based on consumption. We'll need to make adjustments to deal with people's income, as you rightly say.
Okay, Lance Foreman, corporation tax, what would you do with it?
So, over recent years, as George Osborne was reducing the rate of corporation tax, what you saw was revenues from corporation tax actually increasing. And I used to think that, this is a good move. We should drop corporation tax perhaps to 10% below the Irish rate at 12.5% to encourage people to invest here rather than there. But I've actually come round to thinking that what John's talking about isn't actually completely stupid. I think we should completely.
That's an endorsement of sorts.
No, I think we should. I think we should scrap corporation tax, and the reason for that is that, first of all, of course I understand it makes sense and it's equitable to tax the rich to help the poor, but with businesses you don't want to help poor businesses. You want successful businesses to thrive, because they're the ones that drive growth, create employment. And if a business doesn't have to pay tax on its profits, what is it going to do with those profits? It'll either reinvest, which is great because that creates more jobs and more wealth, or it might pay out higher salaries or employ more people. And if it does that, the government actually raises tax at a higher rate than corporation tax, or it can also lower its prices to consumers because it doesn't have to pay so much tax, and that's good for the standard of living.
In an idealistic world, you might be right, but we all know what's happened when there are big profits in large companies. They tend to go off in huge dividends to or bonuses to the directors.
Well, even if that happens, just think the directors pay tax at 45%. Corporation tax is 19%. The government would earn more than double by doing that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. That gives them much more revenue to fund all the public services they want to fund. You should tax people, not businesses. Businesses should be allowed to flourish, and they create the growth, and then tax the people, tax the owners through dividends, tax the employees, tax the consumers and so on. I just think that would be a much simpler and much more efficient way to collect our taxes.
Karen Billamoria.
There's no question about our tax system gets more and more complicated. We need to simplify our tax system. I'm totally for that. But with corporation tax, we need to have a rate. It does worry me that it's going to go up to 25% in one go in 2 years' time. 19% is very competitive, but on the other hand, right next door, as you've just said, in Ireland, it's 12.5%. And again,
but it's going to go up there, isn't it?
There's no question they have been attracting business investment there because of that lower rate of corporation tax. So it's a question of getting balance. But you've got to keep this in perspective. Corporation tax of the whole pie of the tax take is less than 10%. The vast majority, as I say again, comes from jobs. And it's businesses that create the jobs that pay the taxes that pay for the public services that we all benefit from. So we've got to continue to encourage job creation. And the corporation tax has got to be competitive enough to encourage inward investment and internal investment to create those jobs. And also, it's not just the tax rate, by the way. It's things like the super deduction. So the Chancellor's super deduction, where you can deduct 130% if you invest in business, is a master stroke, because normally it would be 18%. You get 25% off your tax by investing. So you've got to encourage investment. That offsets a higher corporation tax rate. So it's very important to encourage investment as well as having a competitive tax rate.
James says, plenty of Brexit, and then he uses a word I can't say on the radio, on cross-question. Tory apologists show, he's calling us. What is the point of going against the tide? Wake up, man. Bad show. Well, I don't actually know how Emma voted in the referendum. I don't know how James voted. John voted. I might have a little bit of a guess there, but we are in a post-Brexit referendum world. And you say, what's the point of going against the tide? Well, we went against the tide in the referendum, in a way. And you can't go back on that now, James, however much you might like to. Emma, corporation tax, is it fit for purpose?
Well, I guess the first thing to say is the hike in the tax rate won't affect lots of small businesses because it's only applicable to businesses that have got high profits. So hopefully lots of small businesses won't see that change in terms of the bills that they're paying. But there's another vote here for simplification. We've been working with the government for a number of years on this. You know, complexity can be what kills small businesses. There's great things like R&D tax credits, which are brilliant for small businesses, but small businesses are just like, well, it just adds into another option I've got. It's great for the accounting profession because you do need an accountant now to navigate things like dividends, EMI schemes, R&D tax credits, super deductions, all of the things. Every time the government announces something, and of course, I read a brilliant profile of our new Secretary of State for Business over the weekend that, you know, before he came into government, he was known as a very free trade person who believed in a very small state and didn't believe in much government interference when it comes to encouraging business and enterprise. But of course, when you go into government, you can't sit there as someone in government to say, oh, actually, I'm not going to do anything. You know, everything is working fine. I'm not going to change the environment. And so what you tend to see is kind of politicians after politicians tinkering, introducing new schemes. All it tends to do is confuse the end user, which is the business owner. So the business owner does go to their accountant to say, what does this mean? And just the comments always around large companies in terms of not paying their fair share of tax, just to confirm, they pay the legal amount of tax. So they sit within the law of what the UK says. But because it's so complicated, it means that they can find loopholes and they can see how to do things differently. So we are huge champions of simplification across the board. If you can help businesses start, and if there was one tax that they pay, you know, the government introduced something called Making Tax Digital, where small businesses now almost don't need to look at their accounts because HMRC knows how much tax to take. That just creates a more simple life for the business owners so they can focus on doing what they do best.
John is nodding a lot there. Listen, we're going to go to a break a little early and then hopefully we can fit two questions into the next quarter. It's coming up to 8:45.
This is LBC.
Has your business lost at least £40,000 as a result of COVID restrictions? Do you have business interruption insurance? If the answer is yes, COVID claims could help you reclaim financial losses, even if your initial claim was refused, you've been made a low offer, or you just don't know where to start, all on a no-win, no-fee basis. Just text ADVICE to 60777 for help from COVID claims, regulated by the FCA. Text ADVICE to 60777.
Did you like it, Grandma?
Wonderful, darling. I'd love to hear another one.
Okay.
Oh, the wonderful sounds of everyday life. Hear them all again with Specsavers' advanced range of hearing aids for different lifestyles, hearing loss and budgets. Search Specsavers Hearing.
Another one?
Why not?
Well, like many listeners, my dear tenor friend and I will not be in the Seychelles this year. But more holidays in the UK means, loads of traffic on the roads. Well, Go Compare have already paid out £1 million on their £250 free excess car insurance deal. Or maybe you're staying at home on the sofa, watching the footy on the telly box, like me.
Go Compare! Go Compare!
Excess refunded after claim settled. Exclusions and T's and C's apply.
Your business has suffered enough disruption recently, so it's never been more important to make sure your IT is in great shape. Logic Networks specialise in IT security, remote connectivity and cloud systems. We'll get to know you and your business, then create the very best solution for your IT requirements, tailored to your needs. For a free, no-obligation IT audit and Office 365 vulnerability test, head online now. It's not magic, it's logic. logicnetworks.co.uk.
If you want to make the most of smart working, then here's a desk that'll work for you. From My Smart Desk. It adjusts to sitting or standing positions at the touch of a button. And now includes built-in USB-C and wireless smartphone charge points. Pre-order with £100 off for just £349, including free delivery from mysmartdesk.co.uk. And make smart working work for you.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
With Purple Bricks, manage viewings anywhere with the app.
8:47. John Elliott has a fan. Edwin in Harrow says, regarding your guest, John, I've never heard such fantastic common sense from one man in my entire life. He's 24-carat genius. Well, there you go.
Thank you, Mother.
Right, James is in, and I'm going to get this wrong, Gillingham as opposed to Gillingham in Dorset. Oh, thank goodness for that. I feel my work here is complete. What's your question,
I really
James?
appreciate you taking my call. Thank you very much. Good evening to you. I'm one of the, what's known as the excluded, one of the 3.8 million UK taxpayers, small businesses who received absolutely no financial support at all during the pandemic. And my question is, very briefly, just to know what the panel feel about that and the justifications for it.
I'm probably going to give a little bit more time to Emma and Lance because they probably feel your pain more than maybe. Well, I don't know. That's unfair to my other two panellists. But Emma, let's start with you on this because this must have been a subject that you've been discussing every day over the last 18 months.
Absolutely, and I can see it from both sides. So, as James said, Excluded UK that he references has been an incredibly strong lobby group. It tends to be made up of limited company directors who paid themselves via dividends. And so, of course, going back to those days when the government rapidly came out with support, the first bit of support was for employees. So the furlough scheme was launched because the government thought we have to take care of employees. The second piece of support was for small businesses in physical premises. So there were lots of cash grants that went out, billions of pounds worth of cash went to businesses in physical premises. Then we had self-employment income support scheme, which was for people who were self-employed and could show their earnings. The Excluded UK, and again, as James said, kind of 3 million businesses were limited company directors. The reason why I say I understand both sides is because from a Treasury perspective, it was very hard for them to assess, through looking at company accounts and company data, had a company paid itself a dividend, or were these dividends that were being paid in very large companies, in which case they would be paying out to people who literally didn't need that money. So I hear the voices of Excluded UK that there was no financial support available, but I also understand where the Treasury was coming from is they had to make a call on who got the support based on the data that the Treasury was collecting from HMRC, so they could easily identify that someone who applied for that support was in financial need of it. And sadly, excluded UK meant that limited company directors who had paid themselves via dividends were just not able to access that. Our advice throughout the pandemic, and sometimes it was welcome, sometimes it wasn't, was to kind of really focus. And again, Iain, you've heard me say this many times, that back in March of last year, we called the first phase of lockdown the dash for cash. Thousands of small businesses came to Enterprise Nation saying, what support am I eligible for? How do I get a bounce back loan? How do I access anything to kind of keep my business liquid? At that time, we were there to help, to say, right, here's where you apply for a bounce back loan. Here are the eligibility criteria for all the support. When we moved into kind of May or June of last year, our advice changed. It was very much focused on, hopefully you've got your financial rescue plan. You've now got to figure out how to keep going as a business. If you're a physical business, sort out your digital presence. If you're already online, let us know how we can help you scale that. So even though, as I say, it wasn't welcome news for the people who weren't able to access that support, as a business owner, if you're not going to get the support, you've got to at some point say, I've just got to figure out how I can change this business so it keeps on running.
Lance?
Well, I had serious concerns about the way the government scheme worked from the outset, the furlough scheme. From my own personal experience, we've been through a number of crises in our business. We had a fire which burnt down our whole premises, and then a year later we had a flood where the whole place was a year underwater. And the saviour for us was the business interruption insurance. Now, with furlough, obviously properties weren't damaged. You're dealing with a virus that's just in the air. But businesses have been interrupted and they're making losses as a result of not being able to trade. And I think that there would have been a far better way of dealing with this by treating it as a business interruption and letting business firms' accountants make claims on behalf of those businesses for the losses that they had incurred as a result of the virus. And then they could have carried on paying whatever expense. They could have paid the employees and so on. But what furlough did, it discouraged work. At the very outset, you couldn't even have somebody working from home for a day or two. You'd have to employ them either full-time or not at all. So they obviously had to adjust that. But even now, there are still 1.5 million people on furlough. I know from my own experience, there are many firms out there that are keeping their staff on furlough because they want to be helpful to them, even though they know there's probably not a job to come back to afterwards. And the crunch will be when furlough completely comes to an end. Are we going to see a huge amount of unemployment, or how is that shift going to work? So, I always have my doubts about the methodology, and of course some people missed out, and these businesses that excluded UK, that they lost out terribly, where if the government had gone down the supporting the business rather than the employee approach, everybody would have been looked after.
Karen and John, I'm not going to come to you on this because I want to fit one more question in, unless you've really got something that you're desperate to say. But James,
I really feel for that. By the way, I really feel for the 3.8 million people.
James, do you want to have a quick reaction to what you've heard?
Yeah, just really quickly. The First Lady, I think it's Emma, took on board what she said. But the Treasury or the Tax Office know perfectly well what our earnings are and where they come from and where they go to, because they tax us on our earnings. It's not like we're sort of hiding anything. We are paid in dividends. My accountant set it up for me. It was just supposed to have been an efficient way. Most of us are just, it's done that way. And we're not trying to hide anything or be fraudulent. And as I said, the tax office know enough to tax us. So, they know where all our money is going to and coming from, dividend-wise and income-wise. That's what I'd say to that. But thank you. I appreciate you letting me ask a question anyway.
Not at all. It wouldn't be the same without you asking questions, James. Let's go to Anthony in Staines for our final question. Anthony, what is it?
Evening, it's very short. Could UK PLC withstand another lockdown?
Karen?
Yeah, we really cannot have another lockdown. And I think as we speak right now, we've seen the power of the vaccinations. I mean, they really are working. They're breaking that link with the virus. We've seen the power of testing, the mass testing that has been available free to all businesses. Businesses regularly testing themselves, identifying people who are infectious. They isolate, everyone else carries on. The thing most people do not talk about is therapeutics. We need to get a Kate Bingham, who was in charge of the vaccine task force, to have a therapeutics task force with repurposed drugs like ivermectin that could hopefully, possibly cure COVID. But right now, as we speak, the biggest worry I have is we've got the opening up on the 19th of July, but actually not the real opening up until August the 16th. And we need to bring that forward when it comes to self-isolation, because at the moment there's so many people who are self-isolating who do not need to. So why can't we have that date brought forward so people who are double vaccinated do not need to self-isolate if you come into contact with somebody who's positive? Maybe you do a test and you register that test, and people who are under 18 don't. But people in between who are not double vaccinated, you give them the option. If you come into contact with somebody who's positive, you have a daily lateral flow test that you register. If you're negative, you go to work. And if you are infected, it'll be picked up the next day. So we've got to minimize the risk, but we've got to allow our economy to open up. Otherwise, we're opening up the economy on the one hand on the 19th, and we're closing it down by lots and lots of people having to self-isolate. And by the way, this is affecting hospitals, it's affecting the workplace, it's affecting the immigration at the borders as we're opening up travel. If you've got border force people who have to self-isolate. By the way, why can't we at the borders, all those empty counters, why can't we hire recent graduates or students to check the documents and then get people going through to the e-gates and not have 2, 3, 4-hour queues? Why can't we be creative? And
which in themselves are a real problem.
So we need to unblock travel now, whether it's tourism and business.
John, I saw you nodding a lot there.
Well, vaccination to me has made the COVID virus less dangerous than influenza. So why are we doing all this extra work now? It's actually less dangerous than influenza. So we should be opening up completely. 99% of deaths were people over 40. You know, we've just got to look at it afresh. The vaccine means this is less dangerous than influenza. And we wouldn't do this with that, would we? We wouldn't have people locking down because they'd been in contact with someone.
But if there was another lockdown, how would that affect your business?
Well, it's difficult. It's difficult, but business, you see, we find the ways around things. We still survived, you know. We didn't close down. We just found ways of working because that's what businesses do. But I don't think we need another lockdown. Vaccine means this virus is less dangerous than influenza. It's clear. The evidence is very, very clear that's the case.
Emma?
Yeah, just agree with everything that's been said. No further lockdowns. Again, we've mentioned this a few times on the programme tonight. What small businesses hate is lack of certainty. And what they've got now is certainty of a roadmap. Things are being opened up. I can plan for this. I know what my costs are going to be. And what has really challenged them over the past 15 months is we're open, no, we're not. You've got to do this, no, you haven't. And that's the bit that they have struggled with. And of course, then the sales, etc. So certainty, no more lockdowns, boost the confidence in the economy, keep these consumers spending, and businesses will stay happy.
Lance, business is resilient. It is very adaptable, as John says. But for some businesses, there will come a point that if there's another lockdown, that would tip, I think, a lot of people over the edge.
It's not just about whether there will be another lockdown. Even the talk of a lockdown is a problem. You know, in my industry, in hospitality, there are many businesses that don't want to, you know, they're not going to gear up for this autumn and this winter because they just don't want to spend all that money setting up again only to be closed down again. They need a cast iron guarantee that they can go ahead and invest and it's going to be safe to do so and re-employ people.
But that's impossible for government to give, isn't it?
It's not impossible because, you know...
they don't know that there could be, I don't know, a French variant, another Brazilian variant that could render the whole vaccination programme completely redundant.
Well, if we don't have a vaccine, what else do we do? We can't keep locking down forever. There are countries that didn't lock down. If you look at certain parts of the USA, you know, Miami and Texas, they didn't lock down, they didn't wear masks, and they've had better results than California where they did. So, you know, we have to learn to live with us. We need to protect the vulnerable people. And I should end on a positive note, which is that there was a lot of talk about improving your vitamin D immunity, and you can get 97% of that from an 85-gram plate of smoked salmon. So there we go.
I tell And the great news is we've got a great new health secretary, Sajid Javid, who's the most experienced cabinet minister in government. So I think we're in good hands.
Final text question, which I think will give you all a bit more room to express some optimism. Sarah in Cheam, I'm considering starting up a small haberdashery company. What's the most fun part about doing business? Is it worth the stress? Well, Emma, you always look as if you're having fun whenever you come on the programme and talk about business. What's the most fun part about doing business?
The freedom and just the ability to take your passion, turn it into a way of making a living. And of course, what every business owner loves is no one's telling them what to do. So create your own rules, enjoy that freedom, and definitely do it.
You let your inner control freak out. Karen?
Oh, being an entrepreneur, being in business is wonderful. Being creative, being innovative, having that freedom, being able to grow things, to employ people, to build teams, to have that buzz, that energy. It's just, and that's why we're now one of the most entrepreneurial countries in the world. And I'm so proud. We weren't 3 or 4 decades ago. Now we are. And I'm delighted and I'm proud to be an entrepreneur.
Lance?
Well, I agree with all of that. But the other thing that I would say, because I in my working sort of life and career, I've spent time doing sort of consultancy in politics and obviously in my business. And I think one of the really exciting things and great things about having a manufacturing business is you have a product that you can be associated with. And the fact that she wants to do haberdashery is fantastic. She'll be producing something, selling something that she can talk about and get excited about, rather than just shuffling bits of paper around and taking a fee for doing so. So, good luck to you. Get on and do it and be passionate. It's challenging. Things go wrong. In business, things go wrong. And you've got to be persistent and just keep going, keep a brave face and have fun.
Whenever I hear the word haberdashery, I just think of young Mr. Grace and Grace Brothers, but that dates me. John, what's your answer to Sarah's question?
Having satisfied customers is fantastic. And the other thing is seeing people, employees, work colleagues, fulfilling their potential. Absolutely fantastic. Happy customers and employees who are fulfilling their capabilities. Wonderful.
Well, I think we've got happy listeners after this hour. At least I hope we have. We've got a happy panel. Emma Jones, John Elliott, Karen Billamoria and Lance Foreman. Thank you very much for joining us on Cross Question this week. And we will, of course, be back with another Cross Question tomorrow.